Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 2 of the UFL season, and welcome to week 2 power rankings. It was a somewhat entertaining week 1, two blowouts, two games that kind of came down to the wire, but we're here for power rankings nonetheless. So before I dive right into it, I want to quickly say if you are new, subscribe, really appreciate it. Leave a like and comment down below your thoughts on your own power rankings as well. So now let's get right into it. At number 8, it is the Houston Roughnecks, and where do I even begin with Houston and the things that are wrong with this team? The main issue is clearly CJ Johnson at head coach, and it's a case where when the broadcast shows that an assistant coach has to help the head coach and what to say during halftime, you know that there is a deep foundational issue with that team. And that's why they're at number 8. Mainly is they're the only team that doesn't feel like they have a foundation in place. And it goes to other levels to the game as well as even the level of play did not warrant any type of hope for this team. I still feel like Anthony Brown should not have been the starter entering week 1, and he kind of showed it in that game as well, going 5 for 11 for 21 yards and throwing 2 interceptions. And yes, one wasn't really his fault, but he did throw one on the second play of the game nonetheless. Nolan Henderson provided some kind of a spark for this offense, and it did lead to the team's only touchdown in this game. He had 54 yards on the ground with his legs and threw for 68 yards in the air with the one touchdown. But it's a case of just this offense was a no-show. The run game from their main running back did not show up on the 11 carries that they had. And the defense looked very rough. They were missing rushing lanes, and they provided very little to no pressure on both Mandy Wilkins and Max Duggan. So like change is needed in Houston, and it really cannot come soon enough with the state of this team. I don't know when we'll be seeing change, especially at that head coaching spot, but change needs to happen. Number 7 is the Memphis Showboats, and they played a close game against Michigan, but much like last year, they have an offense that just feels like it is so close to finding their style, but it's just missing a few things to really get it functional. And in this one, they just couldn't get the job done because of it. My biggest thing with them is they need to figure out the quarterback situation. Both Troy Williams and EJ Perry had a few bright spots throughout that game, but neither really looked like the guy consistently and probably would benefit from being able to play a full 60 minutes in a game, but I don't think that's in the cards anytime soon either. The ground game was non existent with Jalen Jackson and Deneric Prince both struggling to get anything really going behind that offensive line. And it was a defense that played really well and did their job in making this a very close game, and also surprised me with how well they were able to manage Michigan's offense. So there's definitely something there in Memphis, but there had that shakeup before the season with the head coach situation, and I like what Jim Turner showed in pieces for that first game, but that head coach and shakeup definitely did not help them, and they have an interesting path going forward as a team, and it really comes down to figuring out that offense. Number 6 is the San Antonio Brahmas, and man, that was not a great game from them. Their one straight defense that they had last year was pretty much a no-show against Arlington, especially against the ground. Kalen Balazs had over 100 yards on the day. Their pass defense played fine on paper, but it was really only one play that made it look like that, which was the interception. But for the most part, it was a case of the defense just didn't show up. That interception did lead to their first points of the game. But again, besides that, Perez was able to have his way with this defense. Kellen Mond showed rust due to having not really gotten real action the past few years, being bouncing around from practice squad to practice squad. But there was definitely still some bright spots in his play, which if they can hone in onto, San Antonio can still be a really good team going forward. My main thing is they need to get the ground game going. That was one of their key things last year, and on their successful drives, they were able to get the ground game going, especially behind Anthony McFarland and his legs. Need to see him get more touches. Want John Lovely to get more touches. So it's just the offense has something there. They have a foundation. They can just build off of it enter next week. I think they'll be just fine. The other thing is, I was worried about this entering week 1 and still haven't really had any clarification on it, and that is just how good of a kicker Donald De La Haye is going to be. He made his first kick from 39 yards out, missed the other one completely wide left, and it was just not a great kick. So we'll see how he continues to play throughout the year. It was his first time kicking proper field goals since high school, so I'm not going to hold it too much against him, but as the season progresses, I need to see improvement. Number 5 is the Birmingham Stallions. And I really can't tell if that showing is an indication of how Birmingham is going to be this year, or if it's just a simple wake up call and they're going to figure things out. I want to believe that they're going to figure things out, but if they're going to, they need to change something with the pairing of this offense and Alex Magoo. He looked lost out there in his first battle against an XFL team, and he did also have very little help from the offensive line. Despite all of these, though, they were still very much in this game in the final minute and had a chance to potentially tie or win this one, but the drive stalled out due to 2 sacks being taken. Magoo was finally able to use his legs late in this game after being contained by DC the entire game, and it really did provide something to this offense. But his passing ability needs to be worked on as well, as it felt like some of the key guys from last year's Birmingham's team and through the passing game were just no shows in this one. Jay Sternberger barely had any targets. Dion Kane barely had his name called in this one. So they need to work out something. Their defense did look pretty good though. The defense kept them in this one, played really well in this. The only issue is that the middle of the field pass coverage against DC was not good. DC was able to take full advantage of it in multiple big spots in this one. You have to work on that, obviously. Listen, Skip Holtz is a damn good coach. There's a reason that they're 3-time champions in spring football leagues, and he's going to figure something out. But it needs to be sooner rather than later, as they don't have an easy test next week. But again, I feel like Skip Holtz is going to be able to figure something out with this team. Number 4 is the DC Defenders. And that was a massive win for DC considering the amount of shakeups that they had on the coaching staff right before the season. And I have to give massive props to Shannon Harris for getting this team ready to go out there and defeat the defending champs. The defense was the stars of the shows in this one, shutting out Birmingham in the entire second half and having 8 sacks against Alex Magoo. DeAndre Baker had an interception as well in this one, and the Stallions looked completely lost compared to what they were last year. Only 89 passing yards and a combined 38 rushing yards from their main backs. This DC defense played incredibly well. The offense didn't really jump out the page in this one, but they do have a very clear style of play, and they found ways to finish driving the end zone eventually. Jordan Teamu had a 211-yard day through the air with a touchdown and interception. It was on 46% completion, with multiple passes being tipped at the line, but those are things that can be worked on, and plus Birmingham's front seven is a really good front seven. Deion Jackson and Abram Smith ran the ball fine enough. They had splashes of a fantastic power behind their run and pushing the piles fantastically on 2 carries, 1 apiece. But they just couldn't really get anything going consistently. And Matt McCrane continues to be an extremely reliable kicker for DC as well. This is a team that no one really expected to win in week 1, but definitely did have expectations to be a better team than what they were last year. And they already show that to be the case by going out there and beating the defending champs in week 1. A very impressive win for DC, and thus they come in at number 4. Number 3 is the Michigan Panthers, and it wasn't a complete dominance of a showing that I was expecting out of them, but it was still a win that definitely builds a quality foundation for this season. Bryce Perkins played really well in this one, only having 3 incompletions on 19 attempts for 163 yards and a touchdown. His mobility also played a massive factor in this one, with him having a fantastic rushing touchdown for the first touchdown of the game. And Edling played pretty well in his limited snaps in the second quarter before getting that massive hit against him and being out the rest of the game. But it definitely does seem like Bryce Perkins has the momentum and is going to be the guy going forward for Michigan. The ground game wasn't really anything to write home about. Dave McCrary had 34 yards on the day. Matthew Colburn had 32. But it was the main thing was the defense played fantastically. They picked off both Troy Williams and EJ Perry, including the game-sealing pick 6 by Kai Nakua. So it was a great defensive show in there as well. BT Potter didn't really wow me in this one, but he does have massive shoes to fill. With Jake Bates no longer being on the team due to being on the Detroit Lions. So there's a lot of pressure on BT Potter, and Memphis is a very tough place to kick at in the UFL. So we'll see how he does next week when they're at home back in Detroit. But I do like what we saw from Michigan, and they sit at number 3. Number 2 is the Arlington Renegades. And talk about a dominant win and a very, very good statement win to begin the season. Again, a dominant showing against the defending XFL Conference champs. Their defense looked much improved from last year's team, and the run game really stepped up compared to last year's team as well. Luis Perez had a game that didn't really jump off the box score, but he did play really well in this one. He even used his legs at some points in this, and really and kind of made his legs more of a factor than it was last year. The real star of the offense, though, was former Miami Dolphin Kalen Ballage. He had 110 yards on 9 carries and a UFL record 77-yard touchdown run that really showcased the kind of back that Ballage is. He got up to nearly 20 miles per hour and he weighs about 230 pounds. It's a great mix of speed and power behind him and is a dominant threat out of the backfield. The defense plays shutdown as well. It was a good bend don't break game for them. San Antonio had 5 drives that ended in plus territory, and 3 of them ended with no points. That's a really good ratio there for Arlington's defense. And in Arlington, a team that definitely did not live up to expectations last year. They blew a lot of fourth quarter leads and started the season 0-6, and they've instantly have fixed that issue of starting the season slow and blowing fourth quarter leads. So it's a great sign there. We'll see how they continue, but they come in at number 2. Number 1 is the St. Louis Battlehawks. An utter showing of dominance to kick off the season, and what an impressive way to dominate that game as well. It was a different style of Battlehawks football that was shown on Friday compared to what we are used to, as the passing game really took a back seat. Even with that, Manny Wilkins did not throw an incompletion until halfway through the second quarter, and he finished with 189 yards through the air. Meanwhile, the ground game really carved through this Houston defense. Manny Wilkins had 2 rushing touchdowns. Jacob Sailors had a touchdown and 98 yards on 16 carries. And Jarvion Howard, 115 yards on 13 carries, including an at the time record of a 74-yard touchdown run, complete and utter dominance on the ground. The defense also played incredibly well, pitching 3 shutout quarters and holding the Roughnecks to 170 yards of total offense. They disappointed themselves last year by not making a UFL championship game, and they're making it everyone's problem this year. Complete dominance. Anthony Beck is a great coach and having these guys playing really well. There's a lot of question marks entering the season with them moving on from Adrian McCarron, and so far through 1 week, the question was answered and Manny Wilkins seems to be the guy. And even if not, Max Duggan did come into this game for a drive and played well also in that, having about a 14-yard run on his own. And again, played pretty well for his limited amount of snaps. I really like St. Louis entering the season. They did nothing to discourage me in that game. Again, a dominant showing against a team they should dominate. So they come in at the top spot in the UFL Power Rankings. Alright, so quick little rundown. The Houston Roughnecks at 8, Memphis Showboats at 7, San Antonio Brahmas at 6, Birmingham Stallions at 5, DC Defenders at 4, Michigan Panthers at 3, Arlington Renegades at 2, and the St. Louis Battlehawks round things out at number 1. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all next time. Have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.